Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are digging into a pretty dramatic account from the 1st century historian Josephus. In his work, The War of the Jews, he tells this incredible story of how the cruel, calculated actions of just one Roman governor, he argues, baited an entire nation into a completely devastating war.
You know, we often think about wars starting with one single massive event, a big declaration, an assassination, right? A sudden invasion. But according to Josephus, sometimes it's not like that at all. Sometimes it's a slow burn, a series of deliberate provocations that are designed to fan all these simmering tensions into an uncontrollable blaze.
So let's set the stage a little bit. We're in the Roman province of Judea, around the middle of the 1st century AD. And this is a place with a very, very fragile peace. Religious and cultural tensions are pretty much always simmering just below the surface, just waiting for a reason to boil over.
Now, keeping that fragile peace, that was supposed to be the job of the Roman governors, the guys they called procurators. But Josephus describes this really dangerous pattern that started to emerge, a whole line of rulers whose greed just got worse and worse, pushing the province closer and closer to the edge.
Okay, so here are the key players that Josephus really focuses on. He describes this succession of procurators where each one seemed to escalate the corruption. It started with guys like Felix and Festus, but Josephus claims it was Albinus who really turned profiting from injustice into an art form. And then came Gessias Floris.
What's so interesting here is how Josephus directly compares these two. He says Albinus was deeply corrupt, no question, taking bribes, plundering property, but he did it secretly, behind closed doors. His successor, Gessias Floris, was so openly and theatrically evil that, by comparison, he made Albinus look like a saint.
So let's zoom in on this man, Gessias Floris. Because in Josephus' telling, he's not just some corrupt official. He's a monstrous tyrant whose actions almost seem specifically designed to provoke a violent response. And Josephus does not mince words here. He paints this picture of a man who acted less like a governor and more like an official executioner, a man who saw the people he was supposed to govern as nothing more than an opportunity for plunder and cruelty.
And here it is. This is the crucial point in the whole story. According to Josephus, this wasn't just random cruelty. Floris had a chilling motive. He believed that a full-blown rebellion would be the perfect cover for his own crimes. The chaos of war would make his massive theft seem trivial, and it would stop anyone from successfully accusing him before the emperor back in Rome. And Floris found the perfect opportunity to light this fuse in the coastal city of Caesarea. He took a local property dispute and just masterfully turned it into a profitable and incredibly explosive crisis.
So check out his playbook here. A local landowner blocks access to a synagogue. Jewish leaders, desperate, pay Floris a huge bribe, 8 talents of silver, to step in. What does Floris do? He pockets the money and then immediately leaves town, just letting them fight it out. When the conflict, of course, explodes into a riot, the very same leaders who paid him come to complain, and he has them seized and thrown in prison.
Okay, so from Caesarea, the story moves to Jerusalem, and this is where everything builds to a horrifying climax. News of what Floris did had reached the capital, and the people were, understandably, furious.
But the people of Jerusalem didn't respond with violence at first. They responded with some pretty sharp satire. They carried a basket through the streets, mockingly begging for money for the poor, destitute Governor Floris. But Floris, enraged by this public humiliation, decided to respond not with words, but with overwhelming, brutal force.
He marched his army straight to Jerusalem, and, for his first act of punishment, he sent his soldiers to seize 17 talents of silver directly from the sacred treasury of the temple, claiming it was for the emperor. Now you can imagine this act of sacrilege caused an immediate uproar. When the citizens gathered to protest, Floris just unleashed his soldiers on the unarmed crowds. And according to Josephus, they didn't just disperse people. They hunted them down, plundering homes and killing indiscriminately. The number of dead that day, including women and children, was around 3,600. But it was what happened next that, in Josephus's view, was a new, unthinkable low. Floris had many of the citizens he captured publicly whipped and then crucified. Now, crucially, some of these men were of the equestrian order, which means they weren't just Jews, they held the high rank of Roman citizens. For a Roman official to whip and crucify a Roman citizen was a profound, shocking violation of Roman law. It was the ultimate insult.
So when you look at the chain of events that Josephus lays out,
You can see he's building a case. He's arguing that this wasn't just a rebellion that happened to break out. It was a rebellion that was manufactured, piece by horrifying piece.
This slide really summarizes the clear progression he presents, from exploiting a local conflict, to looting the temple, to massacring thousands, and finally to breaking that sacred Roman taboo by crucifying citizens. He portrays a nation being systematically pushed past its breaking point, not by some accident, but by the deliberate design of one tyrant.
In the end, Josephus's dramatic account of Gessias Floris forces us to confront this timeless and really heavy question, one that echoes through centuries of history. What happens when the very authority that's meant to protect you becomes your executioner? It asks us all to consider the true cost of unchecked power and the desperate measures people might take when all other paths to justice have been slam shut.